Now, the deadline for bidders to buy Rangers Football Club passed earlier tonight, with 4 parties expressing interest. The club's administrators say they hope to have a sale put through by the end of the season. This report from Peter Smith contains flash photography.
It's been 7 weeks since owner Craig White put Rangers into administration. 7 weeks of turmoil and uncertainty. A 10-point deduction all but handed their title over to bitter rivals Celtic. And a fighting fund was put in place just to help Rangers make it to the end of the season. Administrators made it clear the only remedy would be a new owner who could save the club from going out of existence. A game of high-stakes poker began. The Blue Knights were first to come to the table. A consortium of fans fronted by former director Paul Murray, which planned to take Rangers out of administration through a CVA, agreeing to settle creditors' debts at a lower value. Brian Kennedy also expressed an interest, but the Sale Sharks owner never considered himself a serious player. A Chicago-based consortium, Club 9 Sports, eyed up Rangers' assets. They wanted to shift these to a new corporate structure, or a new co. A Singaporean bid also took a seat at the table. A UK-based consortium considered playing a hand, but it came to nothing. Brian Kennedy was next to fold. And last night, Club 9 Sports ruled themselves out. At today's 5 p.m. deadline, the Blue Knights and the Singapore bid were still at the table. But then, 2 surprise parties posted late bids. One previously unheard of consortium from Germany, and another from the US. Administrators will now mull over these 4 bids before deciding which one holds the aces. Fans are hoping it's the beginning of the end for the dark days at Ibrox. But with a potentially crippling HMRC tax bill still to be decided, and owner Craig White continuing to lurk in the background, the odds, it would seem, are still stacked against Rangers and any future owner.
Peter Smith there. We're now joined by the Herald newspaper sports writer Richard Wilson, Mark Dingwall from the Rangers Supporters Trust, and the doyen of football commentators Archie McPherson. Mark, you're director of the Rangers Supporters Trust, which has been working with Paul Murray and the Blue Knights consortium. You're the only bid to go public. What are your intentions?
Well, I think the Blue Knights' attitude is that there's absolutely no need for the club to go into liquidation, that in terms of the numbers involved, the club is savable in its current form, and in terms of the deal that Paul Murray negotiated with Ticketus, then that obviously removes a huge legal threat to the club from Ticketus to recover their 27 million, also involves a reduction in what's owed to them, and it's been spread over 9 years, so that obviously, if you take them out of the CVA pot, that means there's more going back to the public purse through the revenue. We'll have a far higher, in fact 50% more money than they possibly thought they would recover for the taxpayer. So all in all, although the circumstances are not great, I think the deal which has been put to the fans groups and we've agreed to back seems to be a way to save the club without going through the humiliation and the terror of liquidation.
The administrators have raised questions, though, about the financial clout behind the bid. You may have the best intentions, but do you have the money to back it up?
Well, initially what you would see is there are men of means involved in the Blue Knights, and essentially we would say them with having the hard cash to actually save the club at this moment. And then there's the once-in-a-lifetime investment from the fans, which could be worth between, say, 15 and 30 million, been brought in there. But obviously I think you're only going to maximise the goodwill of the fans if you come up to certain standards, and the standards we've set are that no one man or concert party should ever again run Rangers, because the danger that's obviously been inherent both with Craig White and David Murray, and obviously the governance and the openness of the club and its corporate structures, we want them changed. And I think although Paul Murray and Doogie Park and people like that do have money, they are still Rangers fans with the best interest of the club at heart.
Richard Wilson, what do you think of the Blue Knights bid?
Well, I mean, I think the Blue Knights bid obviously offers the most comfort to Rangers fans, because they know why Paul Murray and the other people involved want to buy the club. These 3 other bids, we know next to nothing about them. You know, why does somebody from America want to buy Rangers? Why does somebody from Germany want to buy Rangers? Why does somebody from Singapore want to buy Rangers? Rangers don't represent a cash cow to anybody. There's not a lot of money to be made in Scottish football. And I think somebody buying a football club either does it because they want to be involved in the game and they have a lot of money to spend, or they have an emotional attachment to the club. So I think the Blue Knights bid represents to Rangers fans something that they can gather behind, something that they can believe in. And it makes the most sense at the moment to us and to the supporters compared to the other bids, which we know nothing about.
Archie, do you think the Blue Knights make the most sense?
Well, I think the window of opportunity is closing even quicker than these two pandas in Edinburgh Zoo tonight. Frankly, liquidation is still a possibility for Rangers. I'm sure Mark would agree, you know, conditions are not ideal. As a result, we have to look at the realities of it, and that is that Craig White still owns Ibrox Stadium, although saying contradictory statements like he was not going to do any deal with Mal Murray, and then saying, I won't stand in the way of any deal, adding further to the confusion. But listening to people tonight, and not just Mark, you get the feeling there is a possible way out. However, having said that, I'm falling into the trap that others have fallen into right from the start by making up mythical numbers about what Rangers would have to pay the taxman, going up to something like £90 million. These figures are just plucked out of thin air and made to look extremely dramatic for them, much more draconian than it might effectively be, because as you look into it, nobody has yet explained to me in detail what Rangers would actually owe the taxman.
To go back to these other bids, you mentioned briefly there's one from Singapore, one from the United States and one from Germany. I mean, how much do we know about them?
Well, I think that's part of the problem. We know next to nothing about them. I mean, the German one, we believe, is attached in some way to a sports retailer in Germany, but it's not expats, it's not a Scot living in Germany, it's German businessmen. They're using a London brokerage firm to do the deal for them, but we also know that they showed an interest a while back, and then they suddenly returned to the table today, so there was a surprise element to that. The Americans were part of the Club 9 consortium, but are doing it alone, and we know next to nothing about the Singapore bid. So for Rangers fans to make a judgment at the moment, it's almost impossible for them to know which one that they would want to get behind, other than the one that they know about, which is the Blue Knights.
Archie, is that concerning that we do know so little about these other bids?
In actual fact, I don't think we've progressed an inch from the first night we sat here about 3 weeks ago. Yes, on the surface progress has been made because there are now bids. But in terms of uncertainty, we're exactly the same as we were. So we just have to wait and see, because we still don't know the full figures involved in this. This is what is so mystifying. Even Mark, who's very close to it, couldn't possibly guarantee that they're going to get out of this.
Mark, are you worried that you might lose out to one of these other bids?
Well, obviously there is that possibility, and indeed the peculiar behaviour at times of the administrators has been a matter of great concern to, I think, to every Rangers fan. Moving forward, obviously, as Archie said, you've got that contingent liability from the revenue, but obviously in negotiations that have been on by people far more eminent than I am, that can be handled as part of the CVA. That can be handled, and obviously the offer that essentially you have from the Blue Knights makes more money available to the revenue, and that's been part of the Blue Knights' attraction, if you will, is that they've stated from day one they're not looking to escape from Rangers' traditional liabilities, and in fact what they want to be is good corporate citizens to take care of what they can just now and then moving forward.
Richard, how do you think this is going to pan out?
Well, I think it's going to take a long time before we get a definitive decision. There's clearly a willingness amongst the Blue Knights and the administrators to try to find a CVA, to try to get out of the situation that way. But I think we need to know how much Rangers owe. The taxman would then need to make a decision how much is the taxman prepared to take compared to that debt. So there's a long way to go before we get a CVA. Liquidation still, as Archie says, is a possibility here. And I think the administrators have been a little ambitious today to say that they think they can get the club out of administration by the end of the season. I don't think that will happen.
Gentlemen, thanks very much indeed for joining us on Scotland Tonight.